I didn't have much of an update.
No, that's okay. Just I thought if we talked about a few of these topics, we would fill in a lot of blanks.
Yeah, there are a few things that I really want to go over. Yeah.
Because the first part in the introduction, a lot of that's what we actually wrote because we had a couple of videos that we did before.
Yeah.
And so we kind of wrote, okay, well, who would this program be for? And we had all that down. So where it came to like who should read this book, you know, that was all done basically for me. I figured what is risk and crisis management? That's going to be fairly easy and very short. And then why is risk and crisis management important? That's nothing. But when we get to understanding the role of houses of worship in the community, so there were things we didn't really have a lot of content in our thing, but we actually just had it in there. We had spirituality, leadership, but you had also written like openness, community or something like that. I can't remember exactly what was in there. And what I did was I left it at spirituality, leadership, community, and then it was really interesting, Tom, because as I was looking at this, and I was going to put openness last, but I thought we could talk about that in community, right? And as I was looking, kind of Googling, I was seeing what other books and other people were saying what the purpose of houses of worship are within people's communities these days. There were a lot of articles about how the house of worship is playing a bigger role in disaster recovery.
Yeah.
And there are states that have actually created organizations based around it's based around one is called like GEMA. It's Georgia. Yes, it's like emergency management, but it's strictly there's another letter in there somewhere because it's like Georgia faith-based emergency management, something like that.
Right.
Which is a really good thing for us. I mean, if people are going to go out there and they're going to get involved, and this is what a lot of the articles are saying, if the houses of worship are going to get out there and they're going to get involved in disaster preparedness, they need to have the skills, the knowledge, and the tools to do that.
Sure.
And quite honestly, just being a person who wants to help other people isn't good enough. And that's kind of what we want to convey, I think, also is, you know, I have on there in section 1, disaster preparedness and recovery. You know, we could talk about that, how houses of worship are trying to play a bigger role in the recovery of a natural disaster within a community. But, you know, just wanting to do a good job for everybody isn't good enough if you don't know what to do.
Then the synagogues are pretty much setting an example. I mean, it's after the fact, but they are prepared.
They do what?
A lot of the synagogues are very prepared now because of what's taking place.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's unfortunate that any house of worship has to go through what some of the synagogues have gone through this year to make sure that they start preparing. But the fact that now other synagogues are saying, hey, this could happen to us at any time, that's a good thing. Oh, hang on 1 second, Tom. I got a customer calling.
No problem.
Hey, Cassandra. Hi. Yep. Yeah, I was just calling you because my control center called me and they weren't sure if this was, you know, a big thing being their first run. When the shipments left the facility in Chicago after they started going south, one of them took a different route than the other, which was different than the routes I had. So one of them was off route. He's back on route now, but they were off route for about 3 pings. So they were off route for about 30 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So it's the same, you know, it's the very first location they got ended up right on a road, but the control center was looking at that going, did the guy hit traffic? You know, they were wondering if they were overanalyzing it themselves, but then they called me and I said, no, I'll call Cassandra's just to let her know that, hey, they did take 2 different routes. Okay. Oh, did I lose you, Cassandra? Oh, no worry. Sure. Okay. Sure. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. 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 It's funny because, like I said, I didn't tell the command center that there would be tests, and that's why they didn't call it. They're just well, we'll let me know, but they didn't want to call you right away, thinking that they were overdoing it. So that's for me. That's good too. That was actually part of the test because that means they did it also. All right. Okay. No worry. You're welcome. You have a good night. Take care. Bye bye. Okay. Um,
So we're talking about understanding the role of house of worship in the community.
yes.
The section 1.
Hang on 1 second, Tom. Sorry.
No problem.
I just talked to Cassandra. She said the drivers taking different routes right out of the origin was test number 1, period. There will be one more test tonight, and she said it will be later in the night, and she wants the control center to call her. She said she's hoping that I don't call her. So let's keep monitoring and make sure that we see the next stop. Just started a brand new customer. Well, we're doing a demo for a brand new customer, and if we do a good job monitoring tonight, then we're going to win the business. But she set up a couple tests during the shipment, so that's good.
Sound like John Schaefer.
Yeah. Well, she sounds like a female John Schaefer. So talking about going back to section 1, one of the roles of houses of worship in the community is spirituality. That's a given, of course. But what would you like to say about? Is it just teaching spirituality? What is that role of spirituality within a community? What benefit does that role bring to the community?
Well, George, if you look at are you on the table of contents?
Am I what?
Are you looking at the table of contents page right now?
Yep.
Okay. Why don't you go to section 1?
Yeah, section 1, spirituality.
Yeah. Well, section 1, based on the question you just asked me, understand the role of houses of worship in the community. Section 1, right?
Yep.
Because we actually have some bullets here.
We do. So, as far as I'm concerned, the role of houses of worship are these 4 things that we've listed. And we can talk about openness and things like that, but then break these 4 bullets down a little bit further.
Okay.
So
I can do that. So I'll just take that on.
okay. So yeah, when you look at, again, yeah, I think that'd be very easy. And like I said, number 4, I found a lot of articles on how houses of worship are taking a bigger role in this, but they need the tools to do this. But it's great that people are using houses of worship as that platform, in a sense, to come together and train or share the knowledge about this. So, but under and just as you if you were looking at the actual book itself, because I would have like section 1, and then it'll say 1, spirituality. But before I do that, on the page, let me show you here.
So on the page, so 1 through 4, right there, if it says spirituality, you'd like to have like a dash and a little explanation?
Yeah, so, but the way I had it done, so you see how I got like section 1, and then I have the title underneath of what section 1 is? Mm-hmm. It might be mirrored, so it looks like Russian right now, and then I have underneath that, there's going to be like a religious quote, kind of about houses of worship and communities, right? And then under that, I'm going to have like a paragraph, maybe 2, either statements, facts, statistics, or whatever about houses of worship, or it can be that initial, hey, the role of houses of worship in the community is to provide the community with the ability to come together as a community, in the spirit of, or in a spiritual way, which really helps people to connect, not just, in a sense, not just to God, but with each other, and to be open, and to provide leadership within the community, and to allow the people to know. One thing I think we do a terrible job at today is getting to know our neighbor. When I was a kid growing up, we knew every neighbor. So if something bad happened with our neighborhood, kind of everybody knew about it, especially if it was like a family thing. But nowadays, my neighbors, when I moved here, man, they didn't really come see me. I mean, me and Teen, we know our closest neighbors here, and now they've gotten to know us pretty good. But if you waited for your neighbor to come visit you when you move into a new neighborhood,
yeah, it won't happen. Yeah,
it just doesn't happen these days.
Well, people don't come. Well, George, people don't come outside. Remember, like we're from the generation where we actually played outside.
Yeah,
and kids are using technology now. Kids don't play outside anymore.
Absolutely.
Because the kids, that's how we would meet our neighbors. We move into a new apartment in a new borough in New York City, and we get our roller skates, and we run into the other guys with their roller skates, and hey, that's how we met. But that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. And in the book part where I have section 1 also. Now I had just the 1, 2, 3, 4. I had spirituality, leadership, community, and
disaster
preparedness. But like under community, Tom, where we're writing that in there, these other bullet points that I write here, in section 1 that I have actually in the book part.
Yeah.
A haven for persons seeking spiritual fix, attract and grow parishioners, a social center,
right.
A community center for teaching, for daycare, things like all that can go under community.
Absolutely.
So
then what we really, so what I need to do is come up with some things for spirituality. So, spirituality and leadership.
Yeah. I mean, so when you look at that, like again, there'll be a slight paragraph on the first part, and then we break it down. Okay, spirituality, and then we think, okay, yes, that's kind of a given that houses of worship help people to connect with their spiritual. I don't know exactly how you put that, but within a community, how does spirituality actually help a community? Like, what is a house of worship going out there and ensuring there is spirituality? What does that do for a community? I have my perception of that, and that is anytime that, let's just take the process of meditation. It's been proven that, they'll take like 100 monks and bring them into a city, and those 100 monks will meditate for like a week in the city, and they find that crime rate drops. They find that all kinds of things happen. So if you actually have a community that is, first of all, involved together and raise the spiritual awareness of a community, you will have less crime. You will have, people who are, being able to teach your children. You'll have children who are more eager to learn and things like that.
Yeah, and in spirituality, every religion is teaching them to follow a particular deity, and they're trying to reflect that light from there. So it's actually training everyone to be a better citizen.
That's right.
I like to add to with the exception of the community, I'll add to the others. Like you said, disaster preparedness recovery would be a little easier to use, but I'll take that number 1, number 2.
Okay, and something you were just saying there with spirituality. And it's also because there's many different faiths within a community, yet at their core foundations, as far as I'm concerned, all faiths do have that, being a better person is part of that foundation.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to bring out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me highlight these. Yeah, those are the ones that I'm going to take on. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, very good. So section 2, the way I've done it now is, the house of worship leadership, and I've got, you notice I've got the practice in there, the positive attitude, respect, and I thought of really good ways to bring that down, not just for a leader, but a spiritual leader, how all these things really relate to not just the spiritual leader, but how they're going to want these things to be values of the house of worship itself, not just the leader, but the house of worship.
Yeah, I remember we came up with those. Yeah.
So those will actually work out perfect. I'll write those because that won't take me any time at all because we already have all the material. Actually, it's just a little bit of tweaking. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding your community, section 3. I did change this a little bit because we had some other things in there.
Now tell me where you were going with the congregation avatar.
All right. So, when you talk about understanding your community, what this really was, do you really know who your congregation is? Now, that seems like a given, but sometimes the bigger the house of worship, the less they actually know the person who's attending. They don't, they're just there to, they sometimes I think they take things for granted. They think they're there just to teach, but they don't understand who's listening. Now, this also goes to the point where, an avatar is, could a preacher and an imam or a rabbi kind of say, okay, who attends, like who is the average person that attends your house of worship? Do they even know the demographics of those people? What's the average age? What's the average income? What's the gender disparity? Is it 60% male, 40% female? Is it, those are the types of things. So when they look at who the average person is in there, what race are they? What, are they primarily white? Are they primarily black? Are they primarily Hispanic? And then that actually gets back into the, where you say, okay, I'm at an all black church, and all of a sudden the white guy walks in with a trench coat and sits down in the back. Do we pretend he's not there? Right? It starts getting a little bit into the awareness. So it's just truly understanding who your congregation is. And that if you want, I'll write that part about the avatar, but then, just understanding your congregation. Now it gets back into this. Do you truly, does the leadership of the house of worship understand their congregation? Do they understand their problems that they're having within the community? Or Are they just there to teach them for that hour and a half during a sermon, and when they leave, all the problems are their problems?
Right.
Right? Those are really. I think those are really important things, and we would like to think that our houses of worship don't think that, but we see through the problems that houses of worship have with domestic violence and turning a blind eye to that sometimes, that is a problem. And Tom, one of the things we got to talk about is some of these things aren't all standalone. They're all intertwined. Okay. So if you don't understand your congregation, how good of a leader can you be?
Oh, that's an excellent point. I'm pretty involved in a congregation now. And that pastor, this church is a little different from churches I've belonged to in the past, because they have pastors. So he's the kind of lead pastor. They may have about 8 or 9 other pastors, and every one of them is responsible for a section of the congregation. This one may have this demographic. He may have this age group.
Yep.
This one may have this age group. This one may have this gender group, and they work it that way. And then they put their heads together every week to see what issues they'll come up across the 5 or 6 different groups.
So when you think of, and of course everybody reading this is going to have a different ability to reach their congregation too. So you're going to have some churches that are big enough to have, yes, maybe one main person who's in charge of that house of worship, but and then like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 people below them who can break apart, like a demographic or an age group or something like that. But some houses of worship are so small, one person's trying to do it all.
Sure. They'll probably be the typical congregation.
Yes. And, not that we want to overwhelm anybody, but I think a house of worship leader also has to understand that if they don't know who their congregation is, that means either one of 2 things. Either they truly don't care enough to know, they're not actually making an effort to know their congregation, or they don't have the time. Like they're too overwhelmed with everything else that they have to do. And now it's time to bring somebody else in. They need help.
And the smaller the congregation, the more you see that. Yeah.
Yeah. The next part on that was learning from your congregation. One of the things we want, and Tom, I realize that some houses of worship are very set in their ways. They're not going to like some of the things we say, possibly, because when we talk about understanding your congregation, you talk about breaking people into, different, even if you break them up by like, okay, the men over here, the women over here. I've been in a few mosques where, the women are in the back and they're not seen. They're not even really talked to a whole lot. Their problems are their problems. And the leaders of that particular mosque, they don't even know what their problems are, because they don't really, they interact with the men.
And based on tradition, that's a pretty hard nut to crack, because they worship separately. So
that's right.
In most other congregations, you at least worship together.
So, we would hope that through talking about some of this also, that people would kind of step up a little bit and realize, okay, yes, I know my congregation. Well, at least I thought I did, because now when you start asking certain questions like, do you really know your congregation? Is your all of a sudden you realize, 30% of my congregation is female, but I don't even reach out to the females. I don't touch them. I don't talk to them. I don't do anything. And when I say touch them, I don't mean like physically. I mean, I just reach out. And, so that hopefully gets other people also asking better questions too. But that's why, in learning from your congregation, we don't want house of worship leaders just thinking they're there to teach. They're there also to learn and understand.
Yeah, a case in point, I'm co-teaching a class, and I just joined the church. I'm there, and all of a sudden, I'm co-teaching the class, but that's his way of learning from his membership.
Yeah,
he just wants to put you out front. So yeah.
Yeah, and that helps involvement. I mean, if people are always talked to, they don't really feel like they're involved. And then if you are tired or something like that, you're like, I don't really feel like listening tonight. Well, if that's all you're doing is listening, you might have times like that. But if you're involved, Now all of a sudden you can't skip that night because you had, you played a role in
Exactly.
what everybody was going to learn. So that's good. The wolf in sheep's disguise was kind of that.
I remember
Who's out of place.
Yeah, exactly. And and this came up when we were looking at, at different churches that were being robbed, people being murdered in the congregation because they're allowing the wolves in. And yes,
Yeah, people coming into church just to case the place out. They're there looking at the statue saying, "Yeah, I wonder if that's real gold."
I know. I'm in love with churches, and I remember going to Canada, and I could not wait to get to the Catholic churches in Canada because they're so beautiful. They're probably some of the most beautiful churches I've ever seen.
You know what, Tom, and this point will actually go into something else. Also, we talk about a wolf in sheep's disguise. It's also that guy, that husband that comes every week and he's all smiles and he's trying to be everybody's best friend. But the wife never smiles. The wife is a little timid. The signs are there that there might be some kind of like house abuse or spousal abuse.
So,
and you're praising this person for being such a great person, but you don't really know that person because you don't really know your congregation.
George, we never, I remember us talking about this, and I was thinking, I said, man, we just coined the phrase here. We probably didn't think about it. We were having a conversation one day, and the word came up, church place violence.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I was thinking about that. I had a pastor in South Carolina that was counseling this woman that was going through some violence, and I just remember telling him this, dude, you got her in your office with the door closed, and her back is to the door. All she's got to do is break open a blouse. Your career is over. You're finished. It's over for you.
Yeah.
And he says, well, why would she do that? And
it's nice that the pastor would never even have ill intentions like that, but not everybody. It's also it's detrimental to be naive.
Yeah.
Also.
So when you looked at the wolf in sheep's disguise, they've got to protect themselves.
Absolutely. And also it could come down to the point where, if you're not paying attention to the behavior of some of your people or noticing certain things, that's when the domestic violence, that's where you end up with the church place violence, is because domestic violence spills over into a church.
From the household. That's right. It's coming from their household.
Matter of fact, that's probably one of the most, I don't call it popular. It's probably one of the biggest reasons why when you actually see people at church, when there's actually a violent action at church, a lot of times it is something that spilled over from somewhere else. Yep.
Hey, George, I'm sorry to do this to you, man. I got to run and make a pit stop. Sorry about that.
No worry.
Be right back. I'm taking this workplace violence certification course now. I mean, I used to teach workplace violence, but I want to see if there's anything new out there. So I signed myself to take this course.
And how is it?
Oh, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
So I'll test out on it next week so I can get my certification.
Is it with that one dude that does the courses?
No, it's a safety organization. I don't have it right in front,
Okay.
but it's a safety organization that I still belong to. I haven't. I'm still paid up for this year.
Okay. Okay, Tom. So in understanding your community, I had three major points in there. The one is people outside your congregation. When we talk about, sometimes in like my community here, there's, I don't know, 5 churches every mile. They're packed.
North Carolina.
Yeah, and but it's so if something happens, a lot of those people, they have a faith-based place that they can reach out to, but sometimes they're not that close. But even if they are, don't assume that the other houses of worship are reaching out to those people who are not attending anything. Or, Teeny and I were at the park one day, and a church was there just breaking bread with the community. They had a picnic. It was a community event, which I thought was awesome that they were doing that. But I don't see enough of stuff like that where they're reaching out to the entire community just to say, hey, we're here in your community. Just get to know us, because maybe you don't attend our church. Maybe you don't attend any church. But, I got a neighbor right across from me who's in her 70s. Now, she's very much involved in her church, but not every 70-year-old lady is who lives alone. And does the church know? Again, we're getting back into statistics and demographics. Does the church know how many elderly people are living alone in their community?
No.
And maybe one of the reasons they don't go to church is they don't have a ride. But if you're not reaching out to them, you don't know this stuff. Right? So that's kind of what the understanding people outside your congregation, and that's just making an effort to understand your entire community and love them whether they go to your church or not, or doesn't matter, mosque, synagogue, and then the last part of that is people outside your faith. And just because, okay, there's churches, there's 10 every mile or 5 every mile, but what if I'm not Christian? And my nearest synagogue or mosque is across town. But in an actual disaster, am I just kind of left behind because I can't get all the way to my synagogue or mosque? Will the local churches take care of me because I'm not part of their? Hopefully they're not. Hopefully they would never do that, but they would have to understand also. That's just part of understanding your community, is understanding what demographic of your people aren't even Christian or aren't even Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or whatever.
That's an excellent point.
And the third largest recognized, I guess it's not really a denomination of a religion, is the non-religious.
Yeah, I heard that somewhere. Yeah.
So you've got Christianity, then you got Islam, and the third largest group of segment of people that declare themselves of something is the non-religious. So you've got a lot of people out there who don't belong to any house of worship, but may not have anywhere to go in a disaster or an event. That's two-way, Tom. It's not just the house of worship reaching out to you either. That's sometimes when there's an event like that, that person can help you, your house of worship. But if you haven't reached out to them, they don't know that you're looking for help, maybe.
Yeah, we may be on to something here, because when it comes to the safety for the future of the congregation, none of them can afford to think. None of them can survive and be independent. At this point, if 3rd Street Baptist Church, someone committed arson there's a good chance that there's going to be an arson at 2nd Street Baptist Church in the future. But if we never communicate and we never talk, once an issue comes up, at that point, we should be communicating to other churches, regardless of their faith, their membership. We should be, because those things are going to be coming to a theater near you. They're coming to a church near you. That's pretty much how it works. And as you know, arson, particularly arson with churches, because churches remain dormant so many hours a day, unlike other businesses. So they're the biggest targets for arson. So that's a good way that we can get them to start reaching out to other congregations.
And not only that, if your church is burned down, you're out of business. what happens to the people on Sunday when they have nowhere to go? Either you have to find another venue in which you can continue teaching the faith, or those people are going to go to another house of worship. Now, if you've ever jumped around from one house of worship to another, you know that they don't all teach the exact same way or the exact same philosophies. And you may not agree with the way one house of worship is teaching their philosophies. But, you would kind of like to have a place, okay, if something happens to my church, these 2 or 3 churches are where we recommend you go next.
So what I've seen in South Carolina, churches on fire here, I've seen other churches reach out immediately when that church is on fire. That church burns down. These other churches, you guys can, we have our service at 10 o'clock. We're going to allow you guys to come and have your service at our church from 1 to 3 until you get on your feet.
How amazing is that? So that's, and hopefully each community is understanding that. But I think that's something that's worth putting in writing. That's for sure. Because even though it seems like common sense, it may not be common, right?
Oh, look, exactly. Because we're talking beyond common sense. We're talking the value of relationships.
Yeah.
That's, the reason we're doing this together, because we knew there was a value in us still maintaining our relationship. So in all these things, they've got to maintain a relationship with other congregations because their future will require it. Because it's just a matter of time, something is going to happen at one of these churches.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, going to section 4, threats to houses of worship. This is almost where you're kind of getting to the textbook. I kind of mentioned this the other day, though, Tom. As when I looked at all the books that are available on house of worship security and safety, a good number of them read like manuals.
Yes.
You wouldn't read them cover to cover. You would pick the book up and use it as reference. Where I was hoping that our book would be something people would actually sit down and read cover to cover, right? But this part of it, that's why I don't want to give them hey, if I just broke down natural disasters by just kind of list what the potentials are, right? And say, you need to have a plan for these things, but I'm not going to draw it all out in this book. That's what the website's for.
Right.
Go to the website and get the training and continue the conversation on this stuff. We're just raising the awareness on this in this book. So people can easily read this and understand, okay, yeah, this stuff's important. Oh, I never really thought that the flooding would actually be the number one thing that could actually keep me from, being able to hold my service.
And you haven't talked to any Floridians lately.
Exactly. Well, that, and most people, because what gets the news is not the floods. The news is the violence, the active shooters or the active killers in that house of worship. And people are thinking, well, the chance of that actually happening, I don't need disaster planning for that or crisis planning, because people always think the crisis planning is about that one violent act. That's, that horrendous violent act. But the truth is, if you're not prepared for what is most likely to happen, which could be a flood or a fire or a tornado, depending on where you live, then you're not prepared.
Exactly.
So that's, I'll go through those. Actually, I'm just going to brush through them and talk about them, but not really.
Yeah,
I'll probably put statistics in there and stuff like that to keep people interested.
So let's digress a second, then, George. So then, I guess we'll have more time to talk about how we're going to market this particular book, because, like you said, this is not just an A to Z of what to do if something happens to your congregation. It's kind of the preparation way before anything like that takes place. They can grab any book off the shelf. You've looked at a lot. They can grab any book off the shelf. It's going to lead you how to put together a security program for your church.
Yep.
Those are $1.99 a dozen.
That's right.
We want to add something. We want to add something of value, but we want to take a different approach than that.
So I was thinking about this the other day. That exact same thing. Exactly what you just said. Where, being able to find the how you would do all this stuff is simple.
Yeah.
But people are still lacking the why. It's almost like this is the motivation for getting this done. Right. because there are real threats out there to your house of worship. But a lot of this is really for leadership purposes, because it's, that whole part where we just talk through understanding your community. There's a lot of great information in there that's actually fun to read, but a lot of things people are, again, they might be focused on what they're doing and not truly seeing a broader picture of it and how important this is.
And I want to so George, you have somebody in mind for editor?
For what?
Do you have someone in mind when it comes time for us to get an editor?
No, I mean, I just would probably, unless you got something in mind, I would just go to Fiverr and find an editor.
You just go where?
Fiverr.com.
What's that?
Fiverr. Yeah, it's Fiverr.com is it's a website where pretty much any service that you need, people are in there, right? And their services, they might start at like $5, but having if the book, let's say our book is 150 pages long, maybe it cost me $100 to get it edited. But people in there, it's just like it's just outsourcing it. So people in there, they've got star ratings, and you can see, okay, other people whose books they've edited have left them ratings and comments, and the higher the rating, and they're working to keep the highest rating so they continue getting more work. But it's a great website for finding a job. If you need something done.
What's it called?
Fiverr, like a $5 bill, a Fiverr, FIVERR.com.
Got it.
So it's what I use, like when I did the kids book for with Ryan and I. Mm-hmm. I got my illustrator on Fiverr. I had an editor on Fiverr. I had the formatter on Fiverr. And it just, for a couple $100, you've got the whole thing done.
Wow. Well, I know she ain't gonna be that cheap. Okay.
Yeah, but that's why an editor. Like I said, if you have an editor in mind, that's great. But I don't know how much. You kind of want to compare them. Like if that editor is $1,000, but you can do it on Fiverr with somebody who's really qualified. Some of these people their real job is editor, and they kind of do this on the side. Like they're actual editors for a company, but when they're home, they're editing stuff for other people just to make side money because they make good money at it.
Right.
So, it's a great way, I think, to get work done.
Yeah, because that was, and not just editing. I was thinking of another set of eyes, another set of ears, another voice. Because we, a generic editor.
So there are two things you can actually put in there. I want somebody to edit this type of book, and that's actually what their skill is. Like, when I did kids book, I put in, I need somebody who edits. I don't want somebody who just edits any book. I want somebody who edits kids books and understands how to write a children's book. And the person I got was actually, I did two of them because they were so cheap. I did one lady, and it was funny. After she edited it, she brought back hardly any comments. And the lady was like, "You did a really good job writing this. There's only a couple things," and she found a few errors, punctuality, some grammar, things like that. The second editor that I used, she made me feel like I didn't even know how to write. Like, she had so many comments and she reworded so much stuff, and I was like, oh my God, I feel like first of all, I always thought, editing a kid's book, that's real hard, isn't it? Right. But my kid's book hardly had any words on some of the pages, Tom, but she did. She made me feel like I forgot. And Ryan, I wrote it and Ryan wrote it, and we both looked, we had two sets of eyes looking at it. This is only a 20-page kids book, mostly pictures, right? But where the words were, I just couldn't believe how she edited that book. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I said, I couldn't even imagine, writing it like a 200-page book and seeing how bad I would do when a real editor goes in and tears it up on me. But, things sound natural to us because we write the way we speak.
Yes.
Well, but somebody who understands children's books realizes kids don't understand it that way.
Yeah, I found that out the hard way.
Yeah.
Mentoring a first grader now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you that.
No.
I got myself hooked into his what do you call this? He's a child that's been became a ward of the state, and now he has a his mother's in a penitentiary, single parent. So he has a foster mother, and she's handicapped, so she doesn't get along real well. She's got a walker and oxygen. And when I finish playing drums, when I finish playing, when the music is over at church, it takes me a while to take my drums down. And as soon as the music is over, he runs up there and just stands there. He doesn't talk much. So if you want to touch the drum, he'll touch it real fast because he's real shy and all of this. But he always makes contact with me. So I start bringing him books every Sunday. And he started coming over. And then she asked me what I consider myself like a big brother or a mentor for him. I said, okay, well, what do you require? He says, well, they've got a field day. I don't get around that much. Could you take him on a field day? So, George, I'm thinking field days, it's a trip someplace. So, I'm packing my little bag and I come. But it's actually a field day outside, but it's on the school perimeter.
Yeah.
And they're just going through games. They're jumping rope and they're climbing. I mean, they're just they're dancing. I mean, they're having the time of their life. And it's hot. You know how hot it is here. It's like, yeah. So I'm finished up and we get back in the classroom and I'm sitting down with them and the teacher says, and now Mr. Thomas will read to you. And they give me this book to read. And Mr. Thomas, make the wolf sound. Make the wolf sound. So I'm like,
Hey, tell me, do you have that on video?
So that's what I do a couple times a month now.
Very nice.
I'm sorry, I kind of got off track.
No worry.
That's part of why we're doing what we're doing. These children need saving, and he found someone in the congregation that he felt was safe that he could talk to and establish a relationship with.
Yeah. Tom, that actually works for dating too. I find a lot of single people, they feel safer in like meeting people at church events and things like that.
Yeah, rather than the bar.
Yeah.
I mean, if the guy's at the bar, you know why he's there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the guy's at church, first of all, he's a little more disciplined because he's at church. He's family type events. He wasn't out partying the night before because he doesn't smell like alcohol. There's a lot of good qualities that come from that.
Yeah.
But for your younger kids, I'm not say younger. I mean, like your 20, early 20s and things like that. When you move to a new community, it's a great way to go out and actually meet people. But if you're not letting people know you're there, people don't know to come to you. They have to go. They'll meet somebody at work. Somebody at work will say, "Come to my church." But I had a girl from here. She just moved here, come to work for us. I knew her in Texas, and I brought her here. When she got here, she's 20 some odd years younger than me. I don't really hang out or anything like that with her. Plus, she's single. But some of the other guys at the office they're in their early 30s, so she's only a couple of years different from them. They invited her to their church, and she did meet people. She wanted to get out and meet people, and that was a great way to do it. Unfortunately, that church didn't have a message that resonated with her, so she doesn't go to the church anymore. But out of that, she's been dating this one guy that she actually met there.
Voila.
So,
yeah, outreach.
Section 5, disaster preparedness and crisis response. Again, I want to keep this very basic, and it'll just be more understanding what each phase is about, why you go through each, the planning phase. What do you do when you're planning? What do you do? What does preparing actually mean? If I'm responding, you don't have time to go grab the crisis kit for most of the things that'll happen at it's an active killer situation, you won't. But I mean, if it's a flooding and things like that, you'll already have an idea of what steps to take. But so that you can respond to whatever incident is, so you can get through that response phase, and then you can start recovering from it. And then talk about all of that. So,
And that's natural for you. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be easy. Branding and reputation.
Mm-hmm.
This is stuff that we had in there already. If the Catholic Church, some of the head people from the Catholic Church get arrested for, being a pedophile, how does that impact your local Catholic Church in BFE, Idaho, right? Or on a more extreme note, for things that people are more passionate about, if it's somebody go because you had the guys in New Zealand that walked into the mosque and shot all the people in the mosque, and then a little while later you have somebody from a mosque who goes in and blows himself up in a church.
Yep.
Right now, how do people locally feel about, are they going to take action against your mosque for what some other idiot did in another country?
Well, that's what's happening in America right now.
Absolutely. And we have it's not just the U.S. People are just angry. Every country that you see right now that goes through an election, when your party loses, everybody riots. It happened in Indonesia. It happened in Europe. It happened in the U.S. after Trump got. I mean, it's happening everywhere. So it's like nobody, So people are just they're just taking sides so strongly. So the same thing, if a white person, or it's a white person, doesn't really matter what color he is, but if they happen to be in that situation, a Christian person goes into a mosque in New Zealand and shoots everybody, then you get people saying really dumb things like that person in Australia who said, well, they kind of asked for it, now how does that going to take, if I have a predominantly Muslim population, like take Flint, Michigan, or some area where there is a high Muslim population. What's I don't even know what the community that the girl in Congress comes out of, Omar. But Obama resettled so many Somalians into one area that they had a big enough voice in that community to elect somebody to Congress. But so now all of a sudden somebody in New Zealand from a church goes in and shoots all those people. What if you got a church right in the middle of that predominant, a very large Muslim population? If you weren't reaching out to those people ever, they're going to view you the same way that they view the people who shot them, because they don't know you.
That's right. I reached out to a guy that I used to work with in Dallas. He's a Muslim, but they have such a good program at his church. I wanted to make some contact with him. He hasn't called me back yet because, of course, their environment is very secure, George. Mm-hmm. But they don't want any publicity.
Yeah,
I know he's not going to. I know he's not going to want to come and talk. But I want to at least want to get a recommendation, because there's several mosques in that area that great community relations. When we go out and they have these block festivals in Dallas, and I was so surprised that the mosque would set up tables, learn more about our community. As a matter of fact, here's a free book on what in the book that's called "What Is Islam?"
Yeah,
giving out free books and all free pamphlets, and he's part of that congregation, and that's how you make a real impact.
Well, it's funny. If I go to the flea market on Saturday or Sunday, usually one of the tables has the local church will take out a table and they'll hand out pamphlets. Mm-hmm. But there's no other religion that does that.
No, that's why I want this guy to be part of our program, because they're just they come out to engage the community. If there's a community event, they come out.
Absolutely.
Branding and reputation, global event, local impact.
Branding and reputation. That's some of the stuff I want to talk about in that, and then we're back to the whole networking, and that's branding. I mean, again, if people don't know who you are, they're going to brand you based on the global reputation of that particular house of worship or religion.
Yeah. So let me take that one on and add to that.
A house of worship in crisis, that's twofold. One is that could be the house of worship that just was a victim of an arson or something like that. How do you recover from that and hold how does your reputation come through that? Or that could be a leader in that church, again, just got arrested for being a pedophile or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
How does that impact, your church now? All of a sudden, are you going to lose your entire congregation? If you weren't a strong leader to begin with, the chances are pretty good you would. Now, there's a statistic in here that about how many houses of worship actually close every year in the U.S.
Yeah, I read that. So
yeah,
I was doing some research. Yeah.
Yeah. So why do house of worships actually close? Well, it could be, something better. It came up in your area and they stole all your people, but your people wouldn't have left you if you were doing a good job. Again, that gets back to people don't leave jobs, people leave leaders.
Yep.
People don't leave that congregation, people left the leadership of that congregation.
Yep.
So, they didn't do a very good job branding themselves. And so you have it two ways. You have the house of worship that, again, it actually had a crisis event, but then also in crisis could be that's the way I was thinking of it, though, is when it comes to branding and reputation, making sure that you are not just a pillar of the community, but you are a light for that community also.
I like that.
Spiritual disconnection. You and I talked about this a long time ago, and that is, okay, somebody walked into a church and blew themselves up in another country. Now all of a sudden the mosques in the local area are withdrawing from the community. They're afraid to go out and talk to people now.
Yeah.
And it's not just house of worship. Maybe it is that same thing. Maybe all of a sudden your church, somebody in your church does something bad and gets arrested for it, like being a pedophiliac. And then all of a sudden your church now they're afraid to go out and talk to people. They actually withdraw because they're embarrassed, rather than getting out there and addressing the situation and taking ownership for it, telling people how it happened, why it happened, and that you'll make sure it never happens again.
Yeah.
That you learn from those situations, and if you don't get out there and do those things, then look at this is a bad example, I suppose, because it's politics, but look at Pete Buttigieg with his police department and his community.
No, that's an excellent example.
I mean, he seemed really out of touch at that town hall, I thought.
Well, yeah, and he was on point in everything else you've seen him in, but he got caught flat-footed there.
Yeah, exactly. But he allowed a situation to fester, but by actions he took prior to that, because apparently he wasn't listening to people, he wasn't getting feedback, and he had a real problem, but he wasn't connected to that problem.
He fired the former police chief and brought in this police chief.
Wait, he fired the former police chief, who I believe was a black man.
Yeah.
And brought in a white police chief who was probably a little out of touch with the community himself.
Yeah, so he hurt himself pretty much on that one.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, the people in the town hall, they were calling it the way they saw it. Like he didn't care about their community.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to the person who was shot wasn't exactly an outstanding citizen. None of that matters to the community.
No.
That was a human being.
Exactly.
So, and that same thing can happen to houses of worship who, again, if they have a member who acts inappropriately or does something, and if you're not in touch with your community or your congregation or anything else, you can lose them all. And now your reputation and your brand is gone.
That's right.
But you're not just hurting your reputation and brand. If you are like you said, if you're the Third Baptist Church, what they call it, the Fifth Third Baptist Church or something like that, doesn't matter if you're any denomination of Baptist, and something happens at your church and that makes community news, people are looking at the other Baptist church, who's going, all they hear is Baptist church, Baptist church. They may not even see, they might even know which one it was or where it was. They're just telling everybody, hey, did you hear about the guy at the Baptist church who did this to the kids? Right? So if you're another Baptist church, you need to be out there. Your reputation is at stake right now. And if you're not doing anything about that, you're not getting out there saying, hey, this happened at this other Baptist church. We understand why it happened. We've talked to them. We've looked at our own internal policies for hiring, whatever it is, to make sure that that's not going to happen here. But I don't think enough places do that stuff.
No.
Okay. And section 7, a time for action. So this whole book leads up to, this whole thing is like the pressure's mounting, right? we're building the awareness. Then all of a sudden, in the beginning, we talk about, okay, this is why you need to be aware of this stuff. And then it's like, okay, these are your actual threats and the things that can happen. This is what it can do to your brand if you allow these things to happen, you're not prepared for it. Now, all of a sudden, this last section, it's, okay, it's time for action. What are you going to do about this? Now you've got all this information. Are you just going to set this book down and be like, that's actually a pretty good book? Hope that doesn't happen to me. Or are you going to actually take some action? What are you going to do from what you just learned? So it's go back to your house of worship and start that discussion.
You just gave me an idea. Hey, George,
yes, sir.
So we don't want this to be the typical book. Now I'm thinking book, the actual book itself. Are we gonna have a regular book, or do we want a usable booklet? Just food for thought. I was thinking about that. Action, time for action, time for discussion.
So
something usable.
I guess 2 things can come from that. One, I look at this as, an actual book.
That's a book, right?
Right. But it's funny you would say that, because even when I was looking at the kids' book,
I'm thinking more about a workbook.
Well, I've got somewhere here, like this right here, Tom. So I went out and bought this because I was like, oh, this is amazing. So
yeah.
So this is happy mind, happy life, because it's more about spirituality, kind of like New Age type stuff. But this is a calendar really in here. But in here, you can section this off so that. Oh, you know what, Tom? I have another idea here. Hang on, I have this one here, but I have this. So this is something I got years ago. I saw this guy in Malaysia. This is literally a 3-ring binder.
Yeah, so we're thinking the same. Do you see this? What I got here, George? Yeah, we're thinking along the same lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a 3-ring binder, and in this 3-ring binder, he's got it, his title page, and then he's got sections for each one of these.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to see how and then he's got the very beginning. So this was really well done. This cost me, the whole program cost me a couple $1,000, I guess. But there was tons of videos and everything that came with it. But so it can be a 3-ring binder. I think one of the things it needs to be. It needs to be a book, because we're not just putting this in writing for a book, we're also building our reputation. We're trying to be seen in the community as the experts in this, right? And once you write a book, that's what you're seen as, right? You're the expert. You wrote the book. But online on the website, we've got courses that we can build, right? So it becomes this book, only digital. Now we want people taking notes, and we want them, in the end, where it's taking action, we want them taking action at the end.
Exactly.
I think one of the things we tell people in the very beginning is not to just read the book cover to cover, but to actually take time reading this book and get another 3-ring binder or get yourself a spiral notebook where you can keep notes and keep notes throughout the entire, and we encourage them to keep notes. I got a spider coming down here. What the heck? Who said that spider could be in my room? I didn't authorize this. All right, spider, come on. God dang it. He's making a getaway. I'm in this phase, Tom, where I don't even like to hurt the spiders, man. I want to catch them. I want to catch them and let them outside, but sometimes I don't have that. So I feel super bad if I actually kill something. But now I don't know where he is. I let him get away. I think that'd be a great thing to do, though, Tom, is to actually say, hey, or maybe inside the book, at the end of each chapter, we leave 2 pages for notes. Tell people this. I don't know if you. I'm sure you remember this when I say this. I found a book of yours one time, and it was dog-eared. It was highlighted.
You left me a note.
Yeah. Well, we can tell people in the very beginning, this book isn't meant to look good on your shelf. Right? This book is meant to, there's a kid's thing called Wreck This Journal, right? And that means go ahead, write all over this journal, man. Take notes, write, dream, do whatever you want to do, put it in there. But we can actually say, this is what we want you to do with this book. We don't want it to be pretty on your shelf. We want you to have 2 buy 2 of them. Have one that looks pretty on your shelf and one that you actually use.
Yeah.
Right. So at the end of each chapter, we leave ample space for them to take notes.
Yeah, I like that. That because we're encouraging them to actually use it.
Yeah.
As a reference and a tool.
Instead of actually leaving a blank page, though, we can leave a lined page.
Yeah.
And we'll actually put in the top notes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great idea. All right. Now back to my action. I see. Oh, there it is. Okay.
So it's actually 7 sections in the book.
Yep, but this again, and everything is building up to the next section. Again, it's why is this stuff important, and then it's like, hey, what is your role? Why? Yes, it's important, but why is it important to you? Right, and then it builds to the next section, which is okay. Here's the threats that your house of worship actually faces. Here's kind of it's not the solution, but this is what you need to do to mitigate these threats. Right. And then it's, if you don't mitigate this is your reputation. This is your brand that's at stake. And this is what happens if you don't take care of that reputation and brand. And then times number 7, it's okay, get the discussion started, build a team. So now we're actually giving them an action step. And that is, don't just talk about it. Just talking about it is no different than just reading the book and then never using it. Don't go to your church on Wednesday and just talk about it and never talk about it again. Start putting together a team of people who are going to continue these discussions and start putting things into action. And then it's, join Protecting Beacons of Hope Network. We're not afraid to tell people, hey, join our network, because this is where you're going to get the skills, the knowledge, the tools, and be part of a community of people who are all interested in houses of worship. Plus, there's going to be people in this network whose house of worship has gone through a flood, who's been decimated by a tornado, who may have had an active killer at their church, right?
And by the time we get this out, we'll have an action video from some of the top practitioners in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's not just join the network, then it's get the skills and knowledge. And that is, your understanding of all of this. This is just to build your awareness. Now go take the action, get the skills, get the knowledge, get the tools, start the discussion. So it's go do this stuff. I think too many books don't end with a call to action.
That's it. Call to action. Yep.
And then it's, when that's done, it's just a matter of getting it to the editor, having somebody create the cover, get that thing formatted, and start promoting it. And I think, honestly, if we can get, again, the virtual summit's going to be big because I think the virtual summit will come along before the book might be finished. But even if we start getting people into the community on this website, then all of a sudden we advertise the book is available on the website. We've already got a following, right? So the ability to sell, 10, 50, 100 books is already there if you've got people in the community.
So what do you think, George? What do you think about the time frame for the virtual summit? Because you're right. I don't think we got enough time to get the book done before the virtual summit. Although it would be ideal, but I don't think
it would be ideal. But I think the virtual summit needs to happen mid to late August. So that would give us 30 days. If we took the next 30 days, I would say September, but in September I have to go to GSX in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the second week of September. So even if I launch it the third week of September, I'm not really sure because the first, anyway, there's a lot happening there. I'd like to do it like the last week of August is when I'd actually like to launch the virtual summit. That gives us over 30 days to get all the interviews done. And then also promote it and get people in the thing, and time to finish up the website also, which it's almost done. So it's good.
Now, what about the podcast?
So the podcast is in just a couple of days. That's the 15th, I think. And it's entirely possible I could reach out to him because I asked for an alternate time date for that also. I think that was in August. Let me go back and see what that is and ask him if the August date's still available, or if I'm too late. I got this one here, but if I can push it back to August, that'd be perfect. I can still start sending people to pboh.com.
I'm supposed to do this podcast, and I kind of pushed back. I want a little more to be done before I did the podcast. So maybe now. He wanted to do it in July, sometime in July. I want to push it back to August.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to talk more about the virtual summit. And you were just starting to have that conversation with me about that. So I said I wanted to wait until we had something formalized where I can kind of talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. So, I think once the book is done and once the site is up and running, especially, we want to try and get out there and do as many podcasts as we can, be like guest speakers on podcasts. So I'll be reaching out to a lot of people who have podcasts because they're always looking for people to interview.
Cool.
And see how many that we can do. And, the ultimate goal, I guess, is also to have churches reach out and to have the ability, at least for the larger ones, if they could actually pay for us to go to the church, or, it doesn't have to be both of us, but one or the other, doesn't really matter, but to pay to have one of us come and speak and talk about the importance of all of this to their church. Again, I don't want to be doing assessments for everybody, that's for sure. But if they want us to come and they're willing to pay us, to go there for a day and talk and tell them, okay, even if okay, we read your book, we understand all that, we can get the materials, but we want you to actually come and tell us, like, how do we do this stuff? And then you just, look, you need to set this up, and then you just go, we can have our own little template of this is how you set up your program. Give a motivational speech about the importance of being aware of safety and security, having crisis management plans, and having disaster preparedness and continuity and everything else. We can go give a speech to them about the importance of all that, and to their congregation, no problem. So, again, I think that's really the goal, is to have, again, it's revenue coming in from the website, revenue coming in from the book, revenue coming in from the courses on the website, and memberships, and then maybe even, again, some speaking. Revenue from speaking. The only problem with revenue from speaking is that means you're traveling. So it's just a matter of what your tolerance to travel.
Yeah, sure.
That's what's nice about having the website, is you can do it from home. You don't have to travel as much. But I would like to say that somewhere in the next 12 months, I think once we do the first virtual summit, if we can build momentum from that, I think having one live event to start a year would be huge.
I totally agree. Yeah. And then, I even remember the way you did headshots. I remember the photo that you sent out. It was striking. It was attention getting.
You talking about the one with the speakers in the boxes?
Yeah. I mean, you had so many speakers, you couldn't get everybody's picture out there.
Yeah.
But just the one that you had, it was eye catching. Because I had it in my office, and it attracted so much attention.
Yeah. So I think for this first virtual summit, I think the goal would be now for that summit I did with ICR 360.
Yeah.
We had 23 speakers, I think. But the goal for this first virtual summit would be like 10 to 15 speakers.
Yeah, that's more than enough. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'd be okay keeping it closer to 10 really good speakers. So that, and that's just to get the name out there, get it all started. And once we get through that phase, start building up the memberships, building up the name more, getting the book out, because we could actually almost have a plan of, okay, launch the site, virtual summit, release the book, do a live event, another virtual summit. Because if you only have 10 speakers, I guess the nice thing about that is, you said this a little while ago, Tom, it was such a nice thing to say, was because I said all these events were happening. If we had our program ready, we could, this would be helping us with marketing in a sense. But you say, yeah, but things will always be happening. So as things continue to as a big event happens, we could be ready and say, okay, look, another big church shooting happened somewhere in the U.S. While this topic is hot, put together 5 to 10 speakers and release a quick virtual summit on planning, preparing, responding, recovering from an active killer at your house of worship.
Yep.
And just keep doing that and keep plugging away at that until, if you can if you had 1,000 members up to the website paying you an average of $47 a month, that's $47,000 a month. With that, we can pay ourselves to continue doing this full time and also give back to the communities and start sharing more too.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that just about every other Sunday at this little church that I belong to now, the pastor kind of surprised me. Before he preaches, someone that's associated with the congregation comes up and they're allowed to make a presentation that's going to be beneficial to the community and or the church. So I'm definitely going to talk about this.
Oh, absolutely. If that's there, and you would hope that it's the same thing. When we get on Facebook and do marketing on Facebook and stuff like that, it's not just whether or not you need it, but somebody else does need this.
Yeah. Don't
just keep this information to yourself. Share it with people. So, those people who go to your house of worship, when they get back home and they have other family members at other houses of worship, they should be sharing this with them.
Absolutely.
Okay, sir. I didn't mean to keep you this long, actually.
Hey, George, the last thing. Section 7. There's only 7 sections to this book. Uh-huh. You realize that 7 is a spiritual number, right? I mean, God created heaven and earth in 6 days, and on the 7th he rested.
Yeah.
The 7 is significant.
It is funny when I ended, I was like, okay, 7. Do I need to have more, or should I have should I break one of these down? And I was like, no, 7 is actually a very good number.
Absolutely.
For a lot of things, it's and which is really funny actually. Even in the Chinese culture, 7 is an extremely lucky number.
When you get a badge number, we don't know what numbers we're going to get, and everybody's anxious because that number is going to take you through your whole career unless you get promoted. And my number was 761, and the guys were so envious, man. Oh man, we got all those 7s. You know how superstitious cops are.
Oh yeah,
you're surrounded by 7s, and that was a pretty cool number to have back then.
That is good. It's like you've got 7 in there. It starts with 7. You add it up, it's 14, which is actually a 7. You've got all kinds of 7s.
Exactly. So it was pretty cool. Yeah.
That's funny. You know, what's actually funny about that is one of my last debit cards, the 3-digit code in the back.
Yeah.
My 3-digit code was 777. And it was amazing how many times somebody, like if I call them, they'd be like, what's the code in the back? Like 777. How many people actually come, oh my God, that's a great number. Like, yeah, unfortunately, this card's going to expire someday, and I won't have that great number no more.
Cool.
But you don't get a comment on, no other number does anybody ever comment on other than 7, really.
No, it's the only one. This is actually, I think this is some good stuff, George. Now, all the way back to the first page, kind of our logo, Protecting Beacons of Hope.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting ready to do some marketing, and we're getting ready to kind of take off here in the book. Do we still want to keep schools in there?
So the way I have it, Tom, is, well, you read the first page where it's like, while this book is dedicated to houses of worship, Protecting Beacons of Hope was established for houses of worship and schools. So this particular book actually, so here's the thing I was thinking about, Tom. Is the book actually called Protecting Beacons of Hope, or is the book somewhere in there? It has to be either if it's Protecting Beacons of Hope, because that doesn't really tell you what the book is.
No.
Right? The book is
and the symbol is a beacon, so it's not a sanctuary.
That's right. It doesn't show you a cross, Star of David, or anything like that. Right? So people may not realize until we tell them what the connotation is between all of that.
Is that an advantage or a disadvantage? Because, getting someone's attention right away, Protecting Beacons of Hope. Well, what are these guys protecting the water?
Yeah. So I was thinking about that kind of heavily, actually. I was like, well, so if the book could be named Protecting Beacons of Hope, but then there has to be a subtitle underneath that says, again, what it is. That's why we have that tagline underneath it.
I think the tagline takes care of the tagline, I think, spells it all out.
Right. But because this book is only for houses of worship, is the book called like let's safety and security awareness for houses of worship, just something like that simple.
But then it's well, George, if we do that, isn't that just like every other book?
But yes, that's why it could be Protecting Beacons of Hope, and then the subtitle is that what I just said, safety and security awareness for houses of worship.
Well, I think you already have it here. Leadership risk and crisis management training for houses of worship.
Yes, because I want people to understand that this particular book is only if they see our logo, because this logo says schools on it. Again, I want them to draw to this book is only about houses of worship, because later we're going to want to expand to the rest of the stuff.
Right.
Later.
So we use most of the logo.
Okay.
Protecting Beacons of Hope, but maybe instead of having the beacon, do we have a house of worship? I don't know. I mean, at a glance, you want everybody to see, you want to get everyone's attention. You let them know exactly what they're getting right away. Protecting Beacons of Hope. What's a beacon of hope? Well, a beacon of hope, or actually your churches, your houses of worship.
So like we just said, protecting houses of worship. Or it could be like protecting houses of worship, and then underneath, then your tagline is leadership risk and crisis management. But this isn't training; this is awareness.
Exactly. That's why I know we're debating back and forth. But I think Protecting Beacons of Hope is unique as opposed to securing your church. That is so blasé. Oh,
yeah. You lose people because of the title. That's what I've liked. The whole thing ever since you said that, when it was me, you, and the guy out of Philadelphia, it resonated as soon as you said it. We're like, oh, that's an amazing name, Tom Hall. That was awesome.
I was thinking about that guy yesterday. We'll come back to that. I want to ask you something about that guy as far as his contact with imams. But anyway.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I'm sure if what I was kind of thinking, if I reach out to him about that, he's gonna be like, "Well, hey, I thought I was part of that with you guys."
Yeah, that's true too.
And not that I don't want him. It's just he kind of faded away real fast, and he was.
He needs to make. Yeah, well, protecting beacons of hope. The book, Protecting Beacons of Hope.
And then the tagline underneath that is Leadership Risk and Crisis Management Awareness for Houses of Worship.
Yes. And now, for the book, do we need to change from a beacon, like it's the beacon of light here? Although, I don't know. I love it, because we know what this stands for. Or does that need to change into some form of house of worship for the book? Well, you got to decide right this moment.
Let's think about it. We'll have a little bit of time to think about it. But I'm glad you brought that up, because this isn't the cover. This is right. The cover gets done separately. Yeah. I was really just trying to put placeholders everywhere.
No, and I was just kicking around once I saw that. It just made me think.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, I'll keep you all night.
No, I think maybe even if I go back and that logo and have the words underneath taken out, and then we could put like I said, like you just said, put something else underneath there. But
we just don't want it to be atypical,
Yeah.
Church security.
No, that's boring.
Oh, yes.
Plus, even if you use House of Worship, again, when I went to Amazon, it's really easy to go to House of Worship security. And then all these books come up about House of Worship security. And, ours would too, because that'd be a keyword, but it would stand out because it doesn't say what all the other ones say. Right. And people try to get cute. They have like Protecting the Flock, or, they have all kinds of names, but it doesn't, it's not as cool as Beacons of Hope.
Yeah, it's something that resonates.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, that's the best way to put it too. It doesn't resonate like Protecting Beacons of Hope. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The name even gets people. Well, what exactly is a beacon of hope in this case here? Well, in the original case, it was a school, a house of worship. But for the book, it's just a house of worship. So we'll figure it out, sir.
Okay. All right, bro.
Thanks for all the time tonight, buddy. Appreciate
my pleasure. All right, we'll talk.
All right. We'll be sharing a lot of emails probably over a little while. You got logged into your email, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Good. So, if you need anything, just let me know.
All right, George. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks. Take care, sir.
All right.
Bye.